Hey, I'm Morgan.
I'm Chris. Welcome to the Midlife Mud,
where we promise to bring the real shit, all the grit, and pretty much zero clue about how to deal with this crazy phase of life.
And by the way, because this is all about feeling less alone, what we want most is to connect with you.
Absolutely. So take a few seconds and visit themidlifemud.com and join our community.
And you'll stay up to date on all the dirt.
And even better, become a part of the conversation.
We can't wait to see you there. All right, tighten those boots and let's get muddy.
How are you? I haven't talked to you in 5 minutes.
The light is out tonight. Like I'm talking about literally the light is out and we're recording an episode and it's in the evening and I'm loving it.
But it's not dark yet.
It's not dark. The season is coming.
I love spring.
I do too. But I also love winter.
Negative. Ghost Rider.
No, technically I love playing in the snow.
Also negative.
I just got back from Colorado, as you know.
What did you do in Colorado, Chris?
Do you remember that episode we did about play?
Nope. Totally forgot it.
I spent the entire time doing that. There literally was no level 2 fun whatsoever for me. I think there's possibly moments of that for others.
Mm-hmm.
But what was really cool is I can remember, like some of the things that I was skiing, I can remember when they were level 2 fun. But now they've just kind of morphed into level 1.
That's exciting. That's something for me to aspire to.
Yeah.
But that was like your final closing of the season for skiing.
It was. I did have another profound revelation. I might possibly be just plain allergic to the West Coast because day 3 of the trip, I woke up and I felt like somebody was sandblasting my throat.
Really?
Oh my God.
And this has happened to you before?
Well, New Mexico.
Oh, well, yeah, but you were sick before you left.
That's true.
That doesn't count.
So the last 2 days of skiing, I just skied sick. I was like, fuck it, I'm skiing.
And it was still level 1 fun.
And it was still
Nice.
level 1.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, good.
What's going on in your world?
I don't even know.
I'm inspired.
I do not even know. I don't know if I'm coming or going. We've got a month left of school, and then, chaos level 2 begins.
Well, we are in the season of the Blitz.
Oh,
I mean, everything's like going on at one time.
Yeah.
All the spring sports, which for some reason just seem to be phenomenally more intense. And then you have all the other associated events, the graduations,
Mhm.
Easter.
you got to tie up all the bows.
Oh,
And that's what's happening right now. So I'm just praying that I can keep it together. But then summer, I'm always like, oh, I just got to get through May. I'm not sure what I'm thinking because then summer happens. And summer is the busiest time at our house because everybody's going 12 different directions.
well, the thing that cracks me up about summer, like when I think about you in summer, is you have this like twisted sister relationship with summer. On one hand, like everybody's around, but on one hand,
Everybody's around. Yes.
Right.
You know what it is, though? It's guilt.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't do the things that I really want to do, like to put my energy into the things that are my responsibilities, number one, but also that I want to do. Not that I don't want to spend time with my kids, but I feel like all of my time should be spent catering to my kids,
Yeah.
which is not great either. So when I'm not doing that, which by the way, I'm never doing that, not all the time,
Right.
then I feel like guilt. So I'm just wrestling with guilt the whole summer.
I think we should do an entire episode about guilt. We're not doing that today, though.
Not today. What are we doing today?
Well, I did have one little last nugget. You know how sometimes you're not even really aware of what impact you make on other people? You sort of forget,
Mhm.
or you just never even knew in the first place. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine that I haven't spoken with in a couple of years. We just aren't very geographically close and whatever. So we ended up catching up, and we had another mutual friend, and he said, oh, so-and-so says hello. And by the way, they just still really remember how you shared your juggling with everybody. I'm like, I didn't even remember that.
You used to juggle everything everywhere all the time.
Everything. Oh, I gave myself black eyes trying
I know.
to juggle those clubs.
You would pick up anything, though. That doesn't surprise me someone would remember that.
If I'm inspired, I still might do that.
Yeah. I can't juggle worth a crap, which is ironic because I feel like I'm doing a million things.
Didn't I try to teach you?
That didn't go well.
You can do it, and I still believe it.
Ugh. Let's stick with skiing for now. One thing at a time. One thing at a time.
But we're juggling different things.
Speaking of, what are we doing?
Okay. Well, I'm going to segue with another story. So I remember I went to this conference once and I met who's now become a really good friend of mine over time. But I think I was dressed in a black, like long sleeve shirt. It wasn't really a turtleneck, but it had a little bit of a high crew neck and jeans and nice tennis shoes. And this friend of mine shared later, this was his first impression of me, was that I was a finance guy from New York.
Based on you were wearing all black?
I don't really know. Well, it was kind of the Steve Jobs Apple.
Oh.
Like the well-pressed blue jeans with the black top.
Yeah.
And, I think I can be a little bit reserved when I first am in new settings. So I don't know. With all of those things, he came up with, I'm a finance guy from New York.
Which is almost right. Not at all.
Like, I am the furthest thing. I mean, that's an insult to finance guys from New York. But in fact, we are going to talk a little bit about money today. The quick disclaimer is we are not experts at money, nor do we profess to be, nor are we giving any advice about money. This is more about relationships to money and the place that money sits in our lives and the roles that it plays.
Yeah, and I think one of the main reasons we wanted to do this, first of all, it just feels like money is one of the main things that comes up, to the surface in midlife. It's one of those things that's a constant in a marriage that you're, what is like one of the number one leading causes of divorce is money issues, disagreements over money. And so money is just something we're all thinking about. And especially with today's economy, it's a little wackadoo. There's some crazy stuff happening. And the reality is that, to your point, we're not going to talk about what to do with money. If you listen to us, you would probably, I don't know, lose all your money overnight. Do not trust us with money advice. But what we do find really interesting is that everybody has a different relationship with money. And that relationship seems to impact your decision making and the way that you build your life. So we really want to talk about that. Again, no intention whatsoever of giving money advice or tips. If you have any, please share.
Yes. So I really, as I was thinking about this episode, latched on to the emotional relationships that we have with money. And I was looking for things out there to kind of reference or read to inspire me more about this show. And I didn't find a ton. I did find one book called Money is Emotional by Christine Lucan. And the book really ends up being sort of a book about personal finance and gives a lot of recommendations. But she does lead with the fact that we all have emotional relationships with money. And she uses this analogy. And Christine, if you're listening to this, I'm going to totally butcher it, so I'm sorry. But I'm kind of paraphrasing the example in the book, was basically you could take $10,000 and you could build a house or a small shack in today's economy. Or you could take that same amount of money and destroy a house that's existing. And in either case, the $10,000 is the $10,000. The $10,000 didn't do either thing. It was the person behind the $10,000 that made the choice to do the thing. And that really struck me as kind of a good example of what I'm talking about when I say money can be emotional. I mean, money in itself is just money.
What you're saying there, it seems like, is money is a tool and people are emotional.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes. I'm not emotional.
Nor am I, but everybody else is. Yeah, that's a great point.
Right. And then I started thinking about this interesting parallel, and you and I were talking about this the other day, where I imagine this spectrum. You know what I mean? I like the spectrums. And at one end is the extreme saver, the really frugal person who just watches every penny, which, by the way, I really respect those people.
Yeah, it takes some discipline.
And then at the other end, you have the extreme spender, right? And then in the middle, there's probably some kind of sweet spot where there's a balance. And what struck me is both the extreme spender and the extreme saver are probably operating from a fairly high level of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually a commonality of those two, even though outwardly they look opposite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that emotion could be the same emotion.
Yes.
You know, it could be, most often is fear, right?
Fear. Yes.
Yeah. So you're right. We build these stories around money really early. I think it starts in early life. We see how our family manages money. We see how other people do it. We're exposed to culture, our culture growing up. And so we get all these messages about what money means and how money flows into our lives and all of that. And so I want to talk a little bit about our own belief about money. And it's interesting because obviously we come from the same family. But even with that, I feel like there are some differences in the way that we've built our story around money. So
I want to ask you a question. Okay. Do you remember Emperor of China?
Yes. For the folks that are listening, Emperor of China was the Chinese restaurant that was like 5 minutes from our house. And we would go there for Friday night dinners with the family almost weekly. It was either there or Chi-Chi's.
Yes. And there was a guy there that would literally play live piano.
Yes.
And he usually wore like a tacky white suit.
Tuxedo or something.
Yes.
Yes.
And he had a big mustache. Okay. So that's setting the scene. That's the backdrop. And we, of course, had our Shirley Temples to drink.
Yes.
And do you remember having conversations at some of those dinners around, we're going to have to watch the spending and...
Vaguely.
Yeah.
I feel like I remember those later.
Okay.
Like later when I was more of a teenager. So maybe I was just completely not paying attention when I was younger.
You might have been, because there's a 4-year difference.
Yeah.
And, I feel like there were a few of those dinners that made a real impression on me, just in the fact of I felt emotional about it as a kid, but I didn't really know what that meant.
What was the emotion?
The emotion was probably some relative of fear, right? But sort of this, well, what does that mean? Like,
right.
We can't come out. We can't do this anymore. I just didn't really understand all of the underpinnings of that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a huge deal. It's just something that I noted.
So from that, what would you say your basic concept or belief around money became early on?
I was thinking about this some, and one of the things, I'm almost embarrassed to talk about it, but I mean, we were pretty well off as kids. We grew up in a solid, dual profession. We never wanted for things materially.
Yes.
And, I just really didn't realize that as a kid. And I remember some of the first conversations where friends of mine, when I was a kid, pulled me aside and said, "You're really well off.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of money." And I never really thought of myself like that.
I know, which is totally, and that is probably going to come up and show up throughout this whole episode.
Right.
I think you and I are both very aware now, the place of privilege that we come from.
Yes.
And that definitely colors the way that we interact with money and our beliefs around money. 100%.
What's really interesting to me is, at least my experience as an adult has been, I've had far less money myself than we had as a family growing up. Like, I don't live the same lifestyle that I did growing up.
Right.
And that's okay, but it hasn't always been. There was a time where I felt like really frustrated by that and felt that I needed to chase down getting that back.
Having that still.
Having that, which sort of relates to another point I was going to make around material things and image related to money. Having material things as a status.
Yeah.
And really trying to kind of make up that gap and land at least where you grew up in, if not better.
Yes. Man, there's loads to say about that. And I think we'll touch on that more just when we start talking more about like identity, and money in midlife can become very much about identity.
Right.
But I want to go back to like what you were saying about the early belief around money and that sort of fear that was surrounding it. I think, interestingly for me, like, okay, do you, my metaphor for this very rudimentary belief that I had, do you remember Dad's Bills basket?
Oh my God. I remember the sound that the wicker made when he picked that fucker up.
He literally had, it was like a 2 foot by 1 foot, 3 inch deep wicker basket that had
Oh, my
all of
God.
the bills and the papers and the receipts and all this stuff. And he would tuck it away in this really ugly brown cabinetry that we had in the living room. Okay. So once every so often, I don't know how often, but he would be out with the bills basket, right? And it was a clusterfuck.
I mean, that fucking bill basket was like a mythical creature. I
Yes.
just didn't understand it.
Yes. And so that's sort of my metaphor for my relationship with money early on, was that, okay, when you tuck away the bills basket, we're not thinking about it. It's not there. No big deal.
Yeah.
And when it was out, it was like in your face, right? So what that boils down to is, for me, it was very much like, buy what you want whenever you want it, figure it out later.
Right.
The good thing about that, I always have believed that money will be there when I need it.
Yes.
It's going to come somehow, some way when I need it. The problem with this very rudimentary version of my relationship with money is that it definitely led to overspending, right? It leads to this impulsive buying.
Do you mean?
Instead of sort of a vision-led, purposeful planning to buy.
Do you have any examples?
So I actually have a really good example. When Matt and I first got married, which was early on in my dental school career. And when you're in dental school, at least for us, most students are completely living off of student loans.
Right.
So you're given them like every semester. I think you get like a lump sum and then that's it for the semester. And then you got to make that work. So with all my crazy budgeting skills, I did not budget a thing. Now, that is not to say that I didn't keep track of what we were spending. You know, I'm still very on top of it that way, but I either miscalculated or didn't account for certain things, because we got to spring break, my freshman year of dental school, and we were just going to drive to Charleston, South Carolina, stay in a condo that my friend, who was another dental student, her aunt or somebody owned it. She was going to let us stay there for free. So it was like this inexpensive way, because we were going to drive and just stay for free and just hang out for the week, right? The day before we're going to leave, I somehow look at our balance and it's like $5. I mean, it was low. And I was the one managing the money. So this was all on me. Like,
Right.
I felt so ridiculous, ashamed, because not only am I going to have to crawl to Matt and be like, something's wrong here. I did something wrong.
Right.
But also, our friends were expecting us to show up. So I was going to have to be like, well, we can't afford it. We can't afford this, no cost trip. It wouldn't have made any sense. So I can't even remember what we ended up doing. Quite honestly, I'd have to ask Matt. But I do remember that feeling of like, shit, this isn't going to work.
That is a really bad feeling.
Yeah. Yes. And I think from that moment on, Matt took it, happily. I was like, you've got to do this. So Matt took over overseeing our expenses and all of that stuff. Yeah, that's my example of how that line of thinking was, where that was pointing me.
I was going to go into something smaller, like trail mix, but I like yours. I like that one you came up with.
Well, and what you're referring to is an ongoing argument that we have in my household about the money that I spend on the food that we eat / don't eat in this house.
Now, while you and I are different with like our emotional relationship to money,
right?
We both do spend a lot on food.
I love food. Food is good.
Do too. Yeah.
And you know what? For all you moms out there who have kids that 1 week like one thing and then the next week they hate it with a passion, how in the hell are you supposed to gauge exactly how much everyone's going to eat, whether they're going to like what you make? I'm sorry, but it's too much. It's just too much. So I take a gamble every week, and sometimes, probably more often than not, it doesn't work out, but whatever.
So the little food anecdote in our house is I like to cook, and, I'm pretty much am the primary cook.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the grocery store, and if I buy any sort of new spice, what do you need that spice for?
Spices can be expensive.
We've got that. Oh, they are expensive.
Yeah.
They are definitely expensive.
But you use the spice, and spices don't go bad. That's my other favorite line. They're not going to go bad. I'll use it eventually.
They don't.
Yeah.
And I do use the spices.
To that point, I do want to bring up something that I heard. I was doing my workout video, as I do, and the leader of the workout, she always has some like motivational speech or something in there. And she said something that really struck me. I was like, man, that's so relevant and so true. She said, something can be highly valuable or it can be really expensive, but it cannot be both. And I loved that.
I love that.
Yeah, because it's like you put your money into what is valuable to you. And
Yes.
why is that valuable? And we can explore that more. But I just want to, for anybody that has not heard that, I loved that. It can be something to kind of think about.
It does kind of tie back into that house story. The money is a tool. Like the $10,000 can be used to do this, or it could be used to do that.
Or buy trail mix.
But it's really the person that drives that. Or
Exactly.
some spicy
or
trail
spices,
mix.
Some spicy
trail mix.
Yeah. So you know what? Next time, if your spouse is like, why are you something can either be highly valuable or really expensive. You're welcome.
But not both.
Yeah.
So unpacking money a little bit more on the emotional side of things. And there's all of this stuff around what having a lot of money means.
Yeah.
Or what not having it means. And for some people, I really believe money's just not really that big of an issue. And I've always admired those people. Like they just kind of live their life and they don't seem all that influenced or motivated. Like they understand money's important at some level, but
it's like there's not a concern one way or the other about it.
Which,
yeah. It's like they respect that they need it, but they're like not worried about it.
Right. And they sort of have faith that it will come, but they're not irresponsible with money, but also not hyper vigilant about it. That might be what that sweet spot in the middle looks like.
Yeah. So now that we're in midlife, paint the picture of midlife. What are we dealing with financially that's a little bit of a challenge?
Well, I'm going to come at this in a little bit different direction. You know, the first thing that I want to say, and I think this is really, I don't know, this really struck me. This was in Christine Lucan's book too. She talks about treating money with respect, even to the point like if you have dollar bills, don't wrinkle them up. Organize them and put them away neatly. Put your coins in a jar. Like,
this is interesting.
Have respect for your money. And, you know, one of the things that is coming to me right now is just in midlife, one thing that's related to money that I'm really grateful for is if I compare now to when I was a kid, I do have a lot more experience with making money, knowledge about how to bring money into my life. And just as an older professional, it can come a little bit easier if I'm thoughtful about it. So I'm grateful about that. On the other side, I got a lot more outgoing.
Yeah. Right? I think we all do.
Kids headed to college. The retirement thing is getting closer and all of those kinds of expenses. And everything just gets more expensive. You want to take the vacation because the kids are getting older. And that's at the same time that you're having to save for college. It's a balancing act.
I think you hit the nail on the head. When Matt and I sit and talk about this, and he is definitely, I don't think he'll mind me saying this, but he is definitely more, his relationship with money is very different than mine. And he is the one managing our finances. And so it's in his face more. And yeah, this is a time when we're pouring, like literally bleeding money into our kids and all of their activities while we're still trying to be like, okay, let's create our little nest egg for when we're not working anymore. Ugh.
Well,
it's a tight line to walk.
I know. There's also that concept of life is short, right?
Yes.
At this phase, I realized that the kids are just growing up so fast and memories are so important. And I think about a conversation we were having just yesterday about how are we going to make this ski trip next year happen in the way that we want it to. And really, so money's involved in that conversation, but the motivation behind it is creating an experience now, which we're recognizing is a special moment. That's not going to be with us forever.
Again, highly valuable.
Yes, highly valuable.
And so that's something I'm willing to fork over money for.
But it's in the backdrop of making sure all those other responsibilities get filled.
Yeah. The other balancing act, and you mentioned this yesterday, is we also, in this phase, often have aging parents, and that doesn't mean like we are not quite there yet. We're not taking care of our parents, but we're knocking on the door of being in a place where, okay, what does that aging process look like for them? What kind of care might they need? Are they financially set up to do that? Are we going to have to help with that? It feels like all this weight falls on us. We got to take care of the younger generation and ourselves and the older generation. That's kind of the pressure that it feels like we're under.
Yeah. I was thinking about the evolution of my own relationship with money. And I would say what's happening, I think, over time is that it's less about status or like having to go back to the analogy of the workout woman, the expensive things, and it's more about the higher value things. And the way that I put it was, it's less about status and more about experience. And there's this other little seedling that's really starting to take hold, and that is the ability to give back.
Yeah.
And use resources and money in that way.
I'm curious, like when you go back to your initial relationship with money,
yeah,
and you talked about, like, what would you say it actually is? I know you said it was sort of rooted in fear. What would you say your relationship with money was like?
When I was a kid, or what do you mean?
Yeah, like early days.
Oh.
Before you really had responsibility. Like, what was the messaging you took in and you're like, that's how I'm supposed to relate to money?
Yeah, well, it was all about spending and having things when I was younger.
For status reasons, did you feel, or?
Yeah, I think so. Like there was something around having the latest thing that made me feel good. Now, the thing is, that was only a temporary feeling.
Right.
You'd have to do it again.
Right, like the next day.
Yeah, right. It's like this dopamine thing that's happening. And I can remember, like, back in 5th grade, do you remember the Sharper Image magazine?
Oh, yeah. I remember the one in the mall. Yeah. You could go there.
They had this leather jacket in there that had, like, different flags. Now, today, that I can't even believe I like that jacket, but that was back when Top Gun was fresh.
Yeah.
And I wanted that fucking jacket, and I couldn't have it, and I couldn't figure out how to get it, and I can just remember that. And then I can sort of track that, like the first iPad was 2010. And I remember going and getting that thing and having people go, oh, you've got the new iPad.
Yeah.
And feeling guilty inside because I shouldn't have spent that money.
Yeah. We grew up privileged and we didn't really know it.
Right.
So when your friends pulled you aside to say, hey, you're well off, do you think that influenced the way you looked at that? Like, oh, that means something, or that gives me a status? I'm just curious.
Well, I was a little bit embarrassed by it because I never really considered that people's experience were different than mine. And remember, we're talking about me as a little kid.
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And so I guess what that did is it did plant a seedling of be aware of other people's situations and the fact that they're not always like mine.
Does that color the way you look at people who have money? Like a lot of money now?
Well, we're kind of skipping around a little bit because I really believe until about 5 or 6 years ago, I kind of put having a lot of money on this high pedestal. And it was something that I really wanted to have. And I think some of that may be just a fact that we came a little bit from that, but it's interesting because there goes the gratitude thing again. I think it's so important to be grateful for what we have versus desire what we don't have. And I've spent so much of my life desiring what I don't have, thinking that when I could have whatever it is, the bigger house, the better car, the money in the bank, whatever it is, that I would automatically become happy and at peace. And the shift has been, I've recognized that a lot of those folks, they aren't happy. Because I've known a bunch of people that have a lot of things and a lot of money, and I've been paying more attention. And what I see is that's not nirvana.
Nope.
It can be, or it can't be. I think a lot of times money just makes things more complicated, especially if you're not really secure about your own values and who you are and what your intentions are and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And I think this speaks to that, what we touched on earlier, which is about identity. And if your identity boils down to the things that you have, which is a reflection of your financial situation, then that's rocky ground.
Yeah.
You know? I think it works the other way too, though. Like, if the reason I asked you that question is, like, if you are someone who sort of is ashamed or looks at people with a lot of money and says, ooh, their priorities are out of whack, right? That's not what I'm saying you thought, but I was curious. There are people that believe that. And I wonder if that impacts the way that they interact with money, right? It's like, I will not allow myself to have that much money because if I have that much money, that would mean XYZ, you know, my priorities are out of whack, or insert whatever. So it can go both ways, however you view it. I think the primary thing is really taking a look at, what is it about having this money that's important for me? What's it going to do for me? You know, what do you believe it's going to do? And if you believe it's going to make people like you or make you seem more important, you know, again, say all of these things about your identity, then that's not really talking about your values as a person.
Right.
You know, that's not in support of who you really are. That's you looking to money to make you somebody, which is a very different thing. And you're going to be chasing your tail.
Well, and I think that as I have unpacked my own relationship with money and how it's been changing, one of the things that I've noticed is I am tending to kind of shift to more of experience-based spending, and like my priorities around how I spend money are changing. And what's interesting is I'm not really as focused on the money. Like, the money is something that I have to plan for, and I've got to be organized and intentional about that. But my focus is more around, what do I want to do? Life is short, so what do I want to do? What's my intention? What's my goal? What are my values around the experiences I want to have and the impact that I want to make on the world while I'm here? And then the money is sort of like follows behind that. Instead of saying, I want to have this house and I want to have this car, and when I get those things, you know?
Yeah. It's like you have the vision, then you ask, how can money support this vision?
Yes. And what do I need to do in order to support this vision?
Yeah, which I think means that you have to be deeply rooted in understanding who you are and what's actually important to you, like what actually matters. And that's where things can be highly valuable, or they can be really expensive, but not both.
And there's also this degree of faith. And it's back to that whole thing about control. All I can do is understand myself, my values, and make a plan based on that. I cannot predict the future. I cannot control what happens or doesn't happen. So there's a degree of faith that I have to have that if my plan goes sideways, it's okay. A new plan will come.
Yes. That's what I was going to say, that my more refined belief about money today, and honestly, I think I have a fairly healthy relationship with money. If Matt were here, he would smack me in the face right now. He would not. He would never lay a finger on me. But, you know, he would definitely give me a look.
He would goad you with trail mix.
He would.
Like, at minimum.
Because I will say, so, but what I believe about money today is that still, money will always be there when I need it. Like, the money that I need will always be there. As long as I show up and I work hard, I keep my eyes open to opportunities that will arise. And what you just said, trust. I trust.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what that means is that I have to wait on certain things. Like, I have a serious vision for our house. I would love to renovate it. Like, I've got pictures in my head and I want to update everything. And I can't do that right now. We just can't feasibly do that. That doesn't mean I'm never going to do it. We will make it happen sometime. It also means sometimes I have to take a leap of faith financially without having any idea how it's going to work, which sounds risky, but trusting that it's going to work somehow. An example of that is, when we decided to send the boys to private school with like 6 months notice. We were not financially in a situation where that was planned.
Right.
And we also knew this is the right decision. We will make it work.
Yeah. Pros
and cons of this one. The pros are I'm a lot more accountable. I'm more responsible. I don't impulsively spend as much. I'm better. The tricky thing The con about it is that the person that I'm married to, and this is very common, does not see money the same way that I do. And so we are constantly circling this topic in different ways because we just have a different relationship with it. He is a lot more restrictive and fearful and practical. So we also balance each other really well. I can be a little bit woo-woo, like the universe will provide. And he's like, no, that's me working every day. You know what I mean? So I get it.
So what do you think is enough money?
I think enough money is whatever money you need right now to support your vision.
Yes.
And I say right now because right now is all we have.
That's right.
That's not to say that retirement is not important. When you're really visioning, you can have a vision for what your retirement is going to be. And so enough is in support of that vision as well.
Right. But I think there's also this concept of, within that definition of enough, which is a very individualized.
Yeah.
Your enough is different than my enough because it's related to who we are as people and what our individual visions are. One concept that I think is so important is to honor the person of today as well as the person of tomorrow.
Yes.
And one huge trap that I see is
you're doing one or the other.
Back to that whole spectrum thing.
Yeah.
You're spending it all today,
yes.
or you're saving it all for tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's like finding that place in the middle where you're living your vision today, but you're also building for your vision tomorrow.
Yeah. Matt and I were having a talk about this not too long ago because, of course, he's always thinking about, okay, we got to put this away for retirement.
Right.
But he's also, you can see he's sort of calculating like, okay, but then that means I have to have zero life right now. And by the time I retire, what the hell am I going to even be able to do, first of all? Like, am I going to physically be able to go travel and do the things that I think that I'm going to be able to do? And so you're right. You have to honor both. You have to be accountable to both.
It's really hard.
It is really hard. And it goes back to that emotion thing. People are just very emotional creatures.
Right.
And so this is just a sweeping generalization. But honestly, if you go under all of the layers, I feel like the primary emotion is fear in terms of spending. Because if you're overspending, maybe you're overspending because you want to look a certain way. You want to come off a certain way. You want to project a certain status. Because if you don't, what? You're afraid of whatever happens.
Right.
Maybe it makes you, like you said, you're chasing that dopamine. It makes you feel good in the moment to buy the thing, but then you don't. It doesn't last. So then you got to go do it again. You're afraid to feel what's underneath without the dopamine. We don't give credence to our emotions enough, I don't think. They are hugely powerful.
Well, yeah. And anybody who's in a sales position understands that, right?
They exploit it. And I think that's what consumerism is all about.
Right. Which the only real antidote to that is having clarity on what it is that you're trying to do. Are you seeking expensive things? Are you seeking high value things? And what's underneath that emotionally?
It's another awareness thing. I know we almost every time we bring up self-awareness, but it's true. We're all so busy going through life that sometimes we're not stepping back and paying attention to, what's underneath it? Why am I doing this? Why do I need this thing?
Well, and we live in this time of kind of financial
chaos.
I like the way you said that. No, it's like financial death by paper cuts.
Yes.
Because you have $15.95 for Netflix, and then
oh my
you
God.
get your Starbucks 5 days a week, and that's like $6 to $25 depending on how many.
Oh, it's way too easy to convince yourself that you're not spending that much on these extra little things. And by the way, I'm not saying there's anything at all wrong with those things.
No.
I love a lot of those things.
But it just goes back to the awareness. That's why I brought it up.
Yes.
Understanding the impact of that and what it means to your specific situation or what it means to my specific situation is so important.
Yeah.
And there was this other little concept that came up that I really liked. I'm again paraphrasing, but it came from that book, and it was around awareness and taking stock of what you spend on all those little things. And then realizing that a lot of times what happens is what was once a treat, like Starbucks once a week, becomes every day. And then, by the way, it's more expensive and it doesn't even feel like a treat anymore.
Yeah, because you're doing it all the time.
So the question was, what can you take in your life and like return it to the status of a treat?
I like that because you're not saying take it away.
That's right.
You're like, how do you make it special again?
I loved it. I was like, oh, that's a good idea.
And you know what? I'm sure you know, there are apps now that you can use to kind of track all of your rando subscriptions that you have for everything.
Yes.
I have never checked them out, but I can understand why they exist. It would be nice to have a very itemized list right in front of your face, just something more in your face so that you can't convince yourself, oh, it's not that big of doesn't have that much of an impact.
Right.
And I think also back to being kind of woo-woo, bottom line is, do you want to have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset? Like, which do you feel like is going to serve you the most? And how does that really influence the way that you make decisions about things?
Right.
I feel like if you're coming from a place of scarcity, you live in a place of fear.
Right.
Right? And in today's economy, that's not too far off the mark. Like, I don't friggin' blame you, you know?
Right.
At the same time, how does that influence the way that I feel like it stifles your ability to vision what you actually want. Like, nope, it's off limits. Can't have it.
Yeah, if you're in a fear mentality, it's very hard to be creative. I mean, those two conflict each other.
Damn it, we're doing the practical dreaming thing again. Like, how do all of our topics sort of weave back together to, well, we could just do one podcast episode and be done.
That makes us sound far too simple.
We are simple. They know already by now.
But I was going to say, like, with the abundance mindset, is I'm getting to a place in life where I'm thinking about that much more expansively than just money.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. It applies to everything in life.
It's the idea that there is enough.
Of all of it, of love, of resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of it. It changes the way you see stuff.
It does. And for me, it helps take me out of that fear of loss, that scarcity mindset, that mindset that says, if you get to have this, then I don't.
Yes.
The other way to think about this is, if you get to have it, then I can have it too. There's enough for everybody to have.
Right. If it's possible for you, it's possible for me. Let's celebrate all of that.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
So the next time you go to buy eggs, you see that they're $100 for a dozen. You know, dream big, abundance. Go buy a chicken instead. That there is my one money tip.
No, we said we're not giving any financial advice. No.
So what are your micronutrients from today, finance guy?
Jesus. That, money is not inherently emotional. Money just is. But what is emotional is us. I'm an emotional being, and I can express that emotion and the intention that's wrapped up in my own emotions through money.
And it's a tool that you can make work for you, or you can make it work you.
That's right. So that ties into my second one, which is money works best for me when I don't make it the sole focus, but rather I organize my intentions, desires, and goals in a way that's prioritized and aligned with my own values, and then let the money follow that.
Yeah, I'm very, very much on the same page as far as viewing money as a supportive tool in my life. And I feel like I've always kind of seen it that way. I don't feel like I need it in order to be someone. I don't ever want it to be something that defines me.
Right.
I'm also totally and completely fine with wanting money and accepting money and dreaming big with money, as long as it's there to support my values, my highest alignment with my values. And that also includes ways that I give back. If you can see money as something that flows in and out, it is a very fluid situation. You're not holding on to it. And you're also not having to reach to get it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm in a money river. That's the imagery that I want to hold on to keep out of that fear place. which again, I know is very woo-woo. And all the finance people are like shaking their heads. And actually, they stopped listening a long time ago. But
they're like, oh boy.
I believe that if I let go of it, it's going to come back to me when I need it. Like it's just there.
I think my financial advisor is one of our listeners, so I'll have to ask him about
Oh,
this.
he just totally unfriended me on Facebook, I'm sure. Delete. Okay, well, do we have any requests or mentions or?
Well, we are carrying on this new tradition of writing a little recap and rekindling conversation with our subscribed listeners on the midlifemud.com. If you go to that website and sign up.
TheMidlifeMud.com. Yep. You have to put the in front of it.
Got it.
Otherwise, it's going to be like what does not exist.
Yeah. So if you want to join that conversation, go to our website and sign up for it.
Yeah, we would love to have you as a part of the community because that's what it's all about, is being a part of the conversation and giving us money advice.
Other than that, we'll see you next time.
Next time in the mud.
Thanks for being with us in the mud today.
If you liked this episode, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the show. This is going to make sure you never miss an episode, and it's going to help us grow our muddy community, which would mean the world to us.
See you next time in the mud.